That role has two parts to it. One part is the traditional chief fundraising officer. I'm responsible for all of our individual support, our corporate sponsorships, our foundation grants, our government support, the individual support of subscribers and single ticket buyers. So on one hand, that's the philanthropic side of this orchestra. On the other hand, the learning side is I'm responsible for all of our education and training programs. So for this orchestra, that is our magnificent youth orchestra, an innovative talent development program which reaches out and embraces and engages young classical musicians of color and then helps them in their pursuit of a career in classical music. All of our young people's concerts, adult education seminars. So I get to, as I've told other people, I get to marry the fundraising with the programs a little bit like a dean of a small college would get to do. I wish I could tell you I started off with it as my original objective, but I didn't. I originally went to college to be a physical therapist, and after my freshman year, I had registered for my sophomore year and had more music classes than I had science classes. So my advisor suggested that over the summer maybe I give some consideration to my interest in music. And I went home that summer not knowing quite what to do, and I got a call from the head of the music management program at the university where I was attending, and he began to describe careers in music management in general, in the music industry, the recording industry, even in law, pursuing degrees in that. And that sounded fascinating to me. So I returned to the university, and my sophomore year switched to a music management degree, which provided me with a core of the music school and a core of the business school. And immediately upon returning, I started working for the city's youth orchestra, and I was the ensembles manager for all of the music ensembles on campus. So I immediately kind of got the bug for working with professional level ensembles. And when I graduated college, I had already had really 3 years of very practical experience, and I was hired as that city's executive director of their orchestra. So at age, I guess I was 21, I had $1 million budget I was responsible for, and 5 staff, and an orchestra filled with many of my teachers from college, which was interesting. And then after that, I worked at that orchestra for 5 years, and then I progressively moved to different orchestras, to bigger jobs along the way, and I've been in Atlanta here for 8 seasons. Many of my colleagues in other orchestras do not have a music background. Most have a background in fundraising, and by and large at higher education in the collegiate universe. I have always found it, this is my 25th year in this industry, I've always found it curious of how you talk to others about being philanthropic if you really don't have a heart for music. So I would say that number one quality, maybe not the only number one quality, but number one is you really have to love what happens on stage on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. Otherwise, the days are really long and the work's really hard. The second thing that I think is a key quality that you must have to be successful and secure jobs in this industry is you have to have a fascination for strategy. And that can be as simple as the strategy of how to talk to somebody about making a contribution, which isn't that simple. There's human instincts, there's motivations, there's experience that has to be coupled together with what you're about to do. But that's a strategy. And you can connect that up to what an institution is trying to do. What is it that over 5 or 10 or 25 years is an institution trying to achieve? And what are the strategies in a period of time that are necessary for that? If you don't have a fascination for that and a kind of a skill or a aptitude for that, I think the work becomes very difficult for you. So probably there are a lot of other things, but love for music and a skill at strategy and all the implications of that, I think, are 2 really important things.
Okay. So, what are some of the challenges going on right now for your job?
Um, I think the economy is the easy answer, but I'm actually not going to give that answer because I think whatever's happening in the economy is merely revealing some underlying things that are going on. I think generation after generation in America, we're getting further and further from the classics. And I think we're becoming more and more of a culture that is very fascinated with the popular. And this has historic precedents too. There are certainly other cultures on the planet that have gone through this sometimes 100, 200, 300 year cycle of very classical in its philosophy and approach and disciplines to very popular. You could study the Roman Empire actually and look at those exact parallels. But I think this is an underlying issue that's going on. An orchestra does something that very few other institutions do. It convenes people around a shared experience of something that's more substantial and has transcended time. That's not to say that other types of music or convening experiences aren't important. It's just that music does offer things that some of those other experiences don't. And I think one of the biggest challenges facing our institutions is that the general culture of our world that we live in currently is not placing a high value on that experience. And that is the enemy that we face. It's not that what we do today is less important than 50 years ago. It's just increasingly less relevant. So trying to make the connection and trying to bring people back to something that is fundamentally sound and important for kind of the human experience, I think that's the biggest challenge we face. It's exacerbated by the economy and by, we live at a time where people are more transient than ever before. If 50 years ago people would never move around like they do today, that's completely different. So your loyalties to where you are and where you grew up are completely different. But at the root of this is just the valuing of the classics. Deep waters on that one. I think we have done a couple of things which are different than our colleagues. Number one is we have not approached all of our classical concert programming like a museum, but more like a boutique or a gallery, meaning that we're willing to approach it differently, talk about it differently, perform things that have recently been written, have those folks here, treat it differently in the concert experience. We're not overly wed to a Thursday night concert being about 90 people in black tails and white tuxedos and down white lights. We're willing to mix that up quite a bit. So that's one dimension of how we're trying to address this. The second dimension is we're perceiving ourselves and working ourselves to being a broker of many kinds of music. So we're becoming comfortable being equally successful at presenting classical music on Thursday night, Michael Feinstein or Marvin Hamlisch on Friday night, and the Eagles on Saturday night. Because maybe at our essence what we're about is we're about the brokering of excellent music. And excellent, Beethoven can be excellent for all time, Hamlisch can be excellent of our time, and the Eagles can be excellent of this time, and that's okay. So it offers some, maybe a tripod of our business model of different business operations that might be good for us. So being more of a broker for music as well. We're offering more programs of different variety now than 8 seasons ago. We have in the past 4 or 5 years, I would say, kind of achieved the pinnacle of celebration for our orchestra and chorus. And we're being invited places that we were never invited as regularly before. Multiple invitations at Carnegie Hall, the chorus to Berlin. At some point, if what you do is not celebrated and acknowledged other places, it becomes very local in texture, and this orchestra and this chorus and this institution is in fact being invited and celebrated in other places. It's not the only measure, but the fact that the Orchestra League is having their national convention for the first time ever in Atlanta next year, I think is another signal that things are different now than they were in 2000 or early 2000. In general, I think that cities, and whatever cities are, it's kind of a broad statement. I think cities are wrestling with how much and what cultural organizations they want. I don't think it's woven into any city or region's constitution that they have to have an opera company or a ballet or an orchestra or an art museum at all. So my prediction is that some cities are going to really shine in these times because they're going to reconnect with their community. They're going to reestablish themselves as the flagship of that city. An orchestra is really the only thing that can carry a city's name culturally someplace else. So when the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra Chorus goes to Berlin, it starts with Atlanta. An art museum really can't do that, and theater companies really generally don't do that. So I think that prediction is that some are going to really thrive. The city's going to rally. They're going to acknowledge that their orchestras are critically important for all kinds of reasons. I also think some are going to pull substantially back and become less and less national in scope, more and more regional and local, and probably less impactful in their communities. And I think at the end of the day, either one of those outcomes is a bit of a litmus test for the underlying quality of the leadership in that community. Which is it? Are we a community? Are we? I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. So Cleveland, magnificent orchestra, spectacular art museum, great culture. Not obvious that Cleveland, Ohio should have those, but they're top of the world class. That is a great achievement. Will that be the measure in which other cities step up, or will they decide local and kind of minor league is good enough? But those two things, I don't think there'll be many in the middle with kind of ambiguous treading water.